Remember when Trump tweeted about doing more for Black Americans than any president since Lincoln? It was a bold claim that caught everyone's attention. He said his opportunity zones would uplift struggling communities. Sounded good, right? The promise was to bring new life to areas that had been neglected for years. But did it actually work out that way? Let's break it down and see if the reality matched the rhetoric. In 2017, Trump signed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, a sweeping piece of legislation. This law included a program called Opportunity Zones, which was supposed to be a game changer. The idea was to encourage investment in economically distressed areas by offering huge tax breaks to wealthy investors. It was a win-win on paper. Sounds great on paper, but the devil is in the details. Implementation is where things often go awry. The problem is there were very few rules about where this money could go, leading to potential misuse, and there was no requirement to track if the investments were actually helping the people who needed it most. Accountability was missing. So, what happened? Let's just say it didn't exactly turn out like they told us it would. The promises made were not the promises kept. Imagine a neighborhood struggling with poverty, unemployment, and lack of investment. Businesses are closing, people are leaving, and the future looks bleak. This is the reality for many communities across America. Opportunity zones were supposed to be a lifeline. The idea was simple: attract private investment to these struggling areas by offering significant tax breaks. Investors could defer capital gains taxes by investing in designated opportunity zones. These zones, identified by state and local governments, were primarily located in low-income neighborhoods. The potential benefits seemed enormous. New businesses could create jobs, revitalize neighborhoods, and offer residents a path to prosperity. At least that was the hope.
But as we dug deeper, a very different picture began to emerge.
One of the biggest problems with opportunity zones is the lack of transparency. During the Trump administration, the government didn't require detailed reporting on where the money was going or how it was being used. This made it incredibly difficult to track the program's effectiveness. We were left in the dark. Were these investments actually benefiting the intended communities, or were they simply lining the pockets of wealthy developers? Initial reports raised serious red flags. It became clear that we needed more information. We needed to know where the money was going, who was benefiting, and whether the program was living up to its promises. What we found was deeply troubling. Instead of revitalizing struggling neighborhoods, much of the Opportunity Zone money flowed into projects that primarily benefited the wealthy. We saw luxury condos, high-end hotels, and even golf resorts being built in Opportunity Zones.
Remember that image of struggling communities we talked about? Well, those luxury condos weren't being built for them. These projects did little to create jobs for local residents or address the underlying issues of poverty and inequality.
The tax breaks intended to uplift distressed communities were instead subsidizing developments for the already affluent. In fact, disclosures obtained by a watchdog group showed that White House senior advisor and presidential son-in-law Jared Kushner raked in as much as $3 million from projects benefiting from Trump administration initiatives in 2019, plus up to $1 million more in rent money from firms which later received COVID-related small business loans from the government. The documents, released by Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, show that the Kushner windfall includes revenues from a Jersey Shore luxury development that benefited from a real estate tax break publicly pushed by first daughter Ivanka Trump, Kushner's wife, in 2017. Kushner reported earning $100,001 to $1 million off an entity called Gellert 80 West End LLC, plus $100,001 to $1 million from Pier Village Hotel 3 JV LLC, and $343,000 from PV Bungalow LLC and what appears to be its bar. These companies are pieces of Kushner Company's sprawling Pier Village project in Long Branch, New Jersey, which Bloomberg Businessweek profiled in 2018 for its receipt of fiscal relief through the Opportunity Zones program. Ivanka Trump was a vocal proponent of this program during the negotiations over the controversial Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which has been the administration's biggest achievement in office. Ivanka Trump advocated for the Opportunity Zones program, while her husband was profiting from it, representing a clear conflict of interest, Crew Communications Director Jordan Libowitz told the Daily Beast. The program seems to have been made to be easily exploitable by the rich and well-connected, starting with those related to the president. Crew pushed the Justice Department to probe the president's daughter's role in advancing an initiative that her husband and father stood to profit from. As with the commander-in-chief himself, the two have stepped back from their private business interests, even as they continue profit from them, a source of constant criticism and controversy. As good government groups complain, it makes them susceptible to corrupt influence. The lack of oversight and accountability in the Opportunity Zone program resulted in a massive loss of tax revenue. Billions of dollars that could have been used to fund education, healthcare, and infrastructure were instead funneled into the pockets of wealthy investors. A 2020 report by the Joint Committee on Taxation estimated that the Opportunity Zone program would cost taxpayers $1.6 billion in 2020 alone. This number was projected to balloon to $13 billion over the next decade. This is money that could have been used to address the very problems that Opportunity Zones were supposed to solve. At the same time, increasing housing unit volume as empty buildings and lots would have been infilled with much-needed units. This would have decreased housing costs and recreating walkable communities. There would have been less food deserts, decreased predatory lending, check cashing fees and loans, and investment of businesses. Instead, it exacerbated the growing wealth gap and left behind the communities most in need.
The story of Opportunity Zones is inextricably linked to the larger issue of systemic inequality in America. One particularly egregious example of this is the antitrust lawsuit filed against RealPage by the Department of Justice, President Biden, and Vice President Kamala Harris on Friday, August 23, 2024, a real estate software company. The states whose attorneys general have joined the federal lawsuit are North Carolina, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Minnesota, Oregon, Tennessee, and Washington.
RealPage was accused of using its software to artificially inflate rents in Opportunity Zones and other low-income areas.
The lawsuit alleged that RealPage's software allowed landlords to collude on rental prices, driving up costs for tenants and exacerbating the affordable housing crisis.
This case highlights how technology has been used to perpetuate and even worsen existing inequalities. It also underscores the need for greater scrutiny and regulation of industries that have a significant impact on people's lives. Instead of revitalizing struggling communities, Opportunity Zones ended up displacing the very people they were supposed to help. The intended benefits often do not reach those in need. This is a classic example of gentrification, where the benefits of investment accrue to newcomers while longtime residents are pushed out. The promise of economic revitalization turns into a reality of exclusion and inequality. The 2017 tax cuts, including the Opportunity Zone program, were sold as a boon for all Americans. But the reality is far more complicated. While the wealthy reaped enormous benefits, marginalized communities were often left behind. The lack of transparency, accountability, and community engagement in the Opportunity Zone program allowed for widespread abuse and missed opportunities. Instead of struggling communities, the program exacerbated existing inequalities. We must learn from the mistakes of the past and demand better from our elected officials. Trump's 2017 tax law is set to expire in 2025, and on November 5, 2024, we, the people of this United States of America, have the grand opportunity to change the trajectory of this nation. We need policies that prioritize the needs of all Americans, not just the wealthy and well-connected. Only then can we create a more just and equitable society for all.